The United States is fucking ugly. Sure, we have mountains and beautiful national parks and amber waves of grain, etc., but the majority of Americans, 52% of them, live in places that look like this, or this, or this.
I see nothing wrong with that. That looks awesome. This person is woke. There are no other streamers, only Turks. True.
From Fresno to Newark and everywhere in between, the collective American experience is one of driving for miles and miles down concrete highways past strip malls, shopping centers, and acres of parking lots. These photos
Ugly as fuck. Wait, that's my town. Yeah, the irony, of course, is that every single photo that she showed could quite literally be pretty much every single city in the United States of America. And I mean every single one, including Los Angeles. Obviously, there are certain cultural landmarks and whatnot that make up the culture and identity of one American city in the heartland versus another American city in a bi-coastal place. However, most of the cities literally have exactly this aesthetic. Now, this is my kind of content. I'm the king of finding what looks good in bad places. Yeah, this is like a geoguesser's wet dream.
Photos could be anywhere in the United States. Is this Illinois? Is this Ohio? Is this Connecticut? Upstate New York? Who's to say? Day after day, year after year, the majority of Americans spend their time driving in their cars down highways that look like this. But it wasn't always like this, and it didn't have to be this way. Once an idyllic escape from the bustle of the city reserved only for the richest Americans, the suburbs became the symbol of upward mobility and the American dream. And thanks to lobbying, money, good PR, and you guessed it, a hell of a lot of racism, the American suburbs were slowly built into what you see today. Ugly spaces that make cars essential, walking impossible, and everyone miserable. This is why America is so freaking ugly. Roll the intro. You know who loves the suburbs, though? Serial killers. Am I right? I'm excited for today's sponsor, Hunt-A-Killer. Hunt-A-Killer is the adult board game company that creates immersive murder mystery games. There's Suburb was perceived on Target or Walmart to get your own immersive murder mystery game today. Thanks again to Hunt-A-Killer for sponsoring this video. In the late 19th and early 20th century, the concept of the suburbs emerged as a result of the Industrial Revolution's rapid urbanization. At that time, the suburb was perceived as an escape from the chaotic, crowded, and often unsanitary
Black people. And also, I guess technically it wasn't just black people. It was like Italians, and also, I guess Jewish people, and who else? The Irish. Does Kaya have fleas? Yeah, definitely. Oh man, she's just itchy. And Polish people.
Conditions of urban life. They were primarily accessible to the wealthy city inhabitants who could afford to maintain two residences or travel regularly between their suburban homes and their places of business in the city. The suburbs offered space, fresh air, and an idyllic pastoral landscape, reminiscent of the English countryside, which was highly idealized in American culture at the time. These settings were presented as a healthier and safer environment for raising families away from the vices and dangers of the city. The original suburbanites, who were the affluent city dwellers, considered their suburban homes as a refuge from the hustle and bustle of the city, a place for recreation and leisure. The suburban houses of this era were often large, detached, and set on spacious plots of land, reflecting the wealth and social status of their owners. They were not yet a part of mass-produced housing schemes. Each one was unique, designed by an architect, and often full of ornate, fashionable details. This was the image of the suburb as a prosperous, serene, and exclusive place. However, this vision of the suburbs dramatically transformed reformed in the United States following the end of World War II with the passage of the GI Bill in 1944, which provided a range of benefits to returning veterans, including low-cost mortgages. This, coupled with the economic boom and the growth of the middle class, facilitated a massive wave of suburbanization, marking the beginning of the era of the mass suburb. While the GI Bill provided a range of benefits to returning World War II veterans, including low-cost mortgages, job training, and college tuition, the implementation of these benefits was not equitable across racial lines. Though the legislation itself didn't explicitly differentiate benefits based on race, in practice, the distribution of its benefits was largely influenced by social and institutional racism. The GI Bill worked in tandem with existing racially discriminating housing and lending practices such as redlining and restrictive covenants, which effectively excluded Black veterans from enjoying the same opportunities for homeownership as their white counterparts. Redlining was a discriminatory practice where lenders would designate neighborhoods with a high percentage of Black people as high-risk areas for mortgage lending. These areas were often outlined in red on maps used by banks and other lending institutions, hence the term redlining. This led to a systemic denial of home loans or insurance to people based on the racial or ethnic composition of their neighborhoods. Moreover, the Federal Housing Administration, or FHA, and the Veterans Administration regularly refused to insure home loans for Black people, both veterans and non-veterans, and were complicit in sustaining racially segregated neighborhoods. Even when Black veterans could secure a loan, they were often steered away from white suburban neighborhoods and instead directed toward urban areas. Suburban developers, like those who built Levittown, often included restrictive covenants in property deeds, explicitly barring people of color from buying homes in these areas. For example, the original contract for homes in Levittown included a clause that the homes could not be used or occupied by any person other than members of the Caucasian race. This combination of systemic racism and discriminatory practices meant that Black veterans were largely excluded from the homeownership boom and the creation of the post-war middle class, a significant aspect of.
So let me explain something to you guys, right? So obviously, there's plenty of books that have been written on the subject matter, and plenty of evidence that this was a very successful form of systemic discrimination. And yet, you know, Ben Shapiro and his kind, conservative monsters, will regularly say, well, point to me where the law is racist and I'll stop it. Now, this is technically outside of the bounds of law, right? It's still a code. It's still a code of conduct, and it's completely not permissible, right? And completely unacceptable by today's standards and even yesterday's standards as well. However, Ben Shapiro would consider this to be technically racist. How does Ben Shapiro defend this? I'm using my lecture tone here. How does Hasan gets a dog, keeps it in a child's play area all day for content. Dogs are not supposed to be locked up all day without exercise of some sort, especially when they're a puppy. This dog gets more exercise than your fat ass does every fucking day. Not only does she get to literally be around her owner, her favorite person on the planet, but also she literally sleeps for the most part during the day, and the times where she's not on camera, she's both sprinting, fetching, going on long walks, socializing with other dogs, and doing literally more exercise than the average fucking dog does on a daily basis. The only dog that would be in a better situation overall than mine would be like a working dog that's just out in a fucking farm, okay? Out and about in a farm, running, letting it loose. Beyond that, as far as a domesticated pet that is living in a big city, this dog literally lives a better life than you do as a human being. So I never want to hear this kind of nonsensical bullshit ever again. Unless you are the type of person who thinks movies are real and have no object permanence and believe that in between the time period where I press the stop streaming button and then press the start streaming button, nothing happens on the planet. Nothing happens in my life. I am just a figment of your imagination, one that is so emotionally and intellectually stunted that you cannot comprehend a world outside of what you are seeing on camera. You can't fucking turn around and say, dude, you're weird, when you say a gross statement that is so far from the truth that literally, virtually every single person in this chat is laughing at you. You can't turn around and go, dude, you're weird for giving me the dignity of a response like I'm a normal human being and not a mentally stunted baby. I'm weird because I take you seriously like you're a real human being. That is my oddity.
Of the idyllic vision of the American dream. This had a long-lasting impact, contributing to the racial wealth gap and patterns of racial segregation that persist in the U.S. today. This, of course, wasn't the only tool in racist tool belts throughout the 20th century. Exclusionary zoning, as it has been used in the United States.
Oh, I forgot. Sorry. We had a lecture moment here. Do you think, how does Ben Shapiro defend this? Flex those creative juices, chatters. Don't Google it. And explain it to me. Well, I'll tell you, I don't know why I acted like someone was going to write it in time. Ben Shapiro will defend it by saying redlining is actually not as horrific, as horrifying as the American woke intellectuals will have you believe. It's actually a consequence of blacks not being able to pay their loans. Of course, a bank, a private institution, is going to want to make sure that someone can pay back their loans. This is the reason why banks were reluctant to offer loans to black neighborhoods. That's it. That's how he defends it. So the reason why I'm mentioning this, why did I explain all this? Because conservatives are not in it in a serious way. They're not genuinely interested in having an argument or arriving at the truth. They're simply interested in defending their reactionary position. And Ben Shapiro is very good at trying to defend a inherently reactionary, oftentimes very racist position with a little bit of intellectual patina. Okay? How does he do that? By giving you some academic language seasoned around what the fucking actual racist bankers were saying when they designed this goddamn structure to begin with.
United States refers to local zone.
Here it is. All right, I'm doing Ben Shabino. Someone sent Powell who tries to say, oh, it's just welfare policies. It's not. It's not welfare that has destroyed the nuclear family. It's actually systemic racism. There's a video on this, yes, debunked Ben Shapiro's attacks on systemic racism. It's 32 minutes long. This also famously ends with, just leave, the PlayStation event video. Anyway.
Zoning ordinances that effectively limit the availability of affordable housing, thereby segregating communities by income and often by race. This type of zoning practice was utilized extensively in the early 20th century as a means to segregate neighborhoods, especially in the wake of the 1917 Supreme Court decision Buchanan v. Worley, which ruled municipal ordinances mandating residential racial segregation were unconstitutional. Exclusionary zoning practices often involved rules that mandated large lot sizes.
I am decreasing the audio on the video so I can increase the audio on my microphone by having you guys increase it. Shut the fuck up. I know the mic is quiet. I know the mic is quiet. I'm adjusting. Please stop. Audrey 3, thank you for the 25
minimums, prohibitions on multifamily housing, and other restrictions that essentially made it impossible for lower-income families to live in certain areas. These practices were often implemented under the guise of maintaining neighborhood character, property values, or public health, but they frequently served to exclude racial and ethnic minorities who were disproportionately low income due to broader systemic inequalities. For example, a town might impose a regulation stating that homes must be built on a minimum lot size, let's say 1 acre. This would effectively raise the price of all new homes in that area, making it unaffordable for low-income families. Because of systemic racial disparities in income and wealth, these zoning regulations had a disproportionately exclusionary impact on communities of color, effectively relegating people of color to the cities while white people left for the economic promise of home ownership, something black people were systematically excluded from. This rapid expansion led to another issue. Transportation. As more and more houses were built, the suburbs had to continue expanding outward to find space for more and more lots. But the people living in the suburbs continued to work and commute in the cities. What's the solution?
This is how the suburbs destroyed the cities, because the cities originally were built not with a car-reliant infrastructure in mind, but the cities were originally built with trams, the cities were originally built for public transit, and mostly walkable.
High-speed rail and incredibly efficient mass transit? No, dummy, cars. Obviously. But it wasn't obvious. The obsession with and reliance on cars that seems uniquely American was manufactured as not a symptom, but a feature of the suburbs. The popularity of the car had major implications for city planning. Urban areas began to be designed around the car, leading to the creation of broader streets, parking lots, and garages. This auto-centric design sometimes came at the expense.
One other fun aspect of a car-centric, car-reliant infrastructure was, and I've said this before, white people are so fucking creative when they're doing racism. Like, they've beefed up their creativity points, they've maxed it out when it comes to just not being around black people, systemically excluding them, stopping them from advancing. So here's another thing that they did. Not only did they create this car-reliant infrastructure, not only did they start paving larger roads, breaking down buildings, making the roads wider, eliminating sidewalk space, eliminating walkable streets altogether, they then used highways to quite literally physically stop black people from being able to walk to areas where white people live. They doubled down on it. They were like, oh, we got to put fucking highways here. Where can we put it? Either directly on top of a black neighborhood or around a black neighborhood, so that they just can't even fucking leave the neighborhood as easily as possible.
Expensive pedestrian-friendly spaces and public.
But for the record, that's how you arrive at questions, dumbass questions that conservatives like Matt Walsh love weaponizing. It's called weaponizing idiocy. Where they go, Hasan, you're so woke. What's next? Are you going to say highways are racist? Yeah, I am. I am going to say that. Everything in America was designed with a racist attitude in mind, okay?
Public transportation often took a back seat. Moreover, in some cases, vibrant neighborhoods, usually populated by people of color, were divided or demolished to make way for highways and roads leading out to the suburbs. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized the construction of a national highway system in the United States. The idea was to facilitate efficient interstate transport and ensure the capability for rapid military deployment in case of emergency. However, it also had a transformative effect on American society by further enabling suburbanization. These highways made it even easier for people to live in the suburbs and commute into the city, further contributing to the growth of suburbs. Additionally, as I said, highway construction often disproportionately affected minority communities. Urban highways were frequently routed through neighborhoods populated by racial and ethnic minorities, leading to displacement, community division, and other negative impacts. According to the Financial Times, broadly, U.S. transportation policy essentialized the automobile. Highways were considered the lubricant of efficiency by American political and business leaders, with other forms of transportation cast aside. Main streets throughout the country were turned over to cars, either with high-speed roadways or sprawling parking lots. Nimble streetcar networks were ripped up and replaced by slow-moving buses that joined the ever-growing traffic jams in American cities. The removal of those streetcar networks was often lobbied for and or financed by oil and auto companies. And when the streets became so clogged that buses couldn't complete their routes on time, people turned to buying their own cars, making the problem even worse. To further encourage the adoption of the car above all other forms of transportation, the auto industry actively demonized pedestrians, making fun of pedestrian victims of auto accidents and coining the term jaywalker from the term jay, used in the late 1800s to mean worthless, fourth-rate, a hick, or a dope. And walking in the suburbs is actively discouraged through city planning that completely removes sidewalks on purpose to remove the urban feel from the suburb that comes with pedestrians. Plus, homeowners didn't want to give up their precious yard space to a sidewalk. So not only does that make walking anywhere in a suburb more difficult, it also actively makes it more dangerous. Pedestrian crashes are more than twice as likely on roads with no sidewalks. What this led to was a massive shift from pedestrian-centric streets and city planning to streets clogged with cars, necessary because of the car-centric planning or lack of planning in the suburbs where workers lived. This in turn increased congestion and traffic, and therefore pollution, in the city centers that were often mostly populated by people of color who couldn't afford or were legally barred from moving out to the suburbs. And the footprint of American cities changed dramatically, from Black communities being decimated by the building of highways through their neighborhoods to entire city blocks bulldozed to make way for parking garages to hold the increasing number of suburban commuters. Not only do these sprawling suburbs require miles and miles of hideous highways flanked by strip malls with ever-growing parking lots, the cities themselves have gotten uglier, with unsafe highway overpasses dividing neighborhoods and parking ramps dominating the skyline. We are all trapped.
One of the other aspects of this is that Americans only encounter walkable cities when they're either in college or if they go to a truly privatized, perfectly shielded area, like whether it's cruises, Disneyland, Disney World, or Las Vegas. It's ridiculous. The only places where you have like adequate public transit in the form of trams and trains and even buses is college campuses and the other places that I just mentioned. There's some cities that are relatively walkable. Yeah, Las Vegas isn't walkable. No, I'm not talking about Las Vegas across the board, dude. Are you kidding me? I'm talking about casinos. A casino has an ecosystem internally. Casinos also have active not public transit, but like active transit going through them. It's a system in and of itself. There are, of course, walkable cities in the United States of America. Philadelphia has a degree of walkability and good public transit. Boston has a degree of walkability and decent public transit. New York obviously is very walkable and has public transit. I wouldn't say it's even fucking decent, let's be real. Parts of DC, Chicago, there are places that have it. San Francisco is another one. Why would we want public transit? Yeah, you're right. You're right. It means it's trans. Man, motherfuckers want to be arguing with you about everything. Yeah, it's really annoying. What do you mean New York is more or less than decent? You think New York is better than decent? I don't think it's disgusting. I mean, New York public transit is always fucked up. It's fucked up in the summer because there's no like air conditioning or anything like that. And it smells awful. It's fucked up in the winter because it floods. It's always awful. Lines constantly fail. All right. MTA is old as fuck, but it does run 24/7, which is a W. Yeah, I mean, go to Japan, then say New York is decent. Exactly. Says the chatter goes to the Times Square and uses the subway once. Yeah, I don't understand. I've never heard anybody fucking defend New York City's metro system. Okay, for the record, though, imagine asking someone who just got back from Japan for the second time how they feel about MTA or LIRR. LIRR is fire, or at least my experiences with LIRR have always been good. And I go all the way up that motherfucker. I go to the end of the line, Montauk. MTA is dog shit, though. I mean, it's fine. It gets the job done, but it's not great. LIRR is dog shit. I like it. All LIRR eastbound trains were canceled 2 days in a row. Yeah, that's true. That does get. Why don't you mention New Jersey Transit, bro? True. Interestingly enough, NJ Transit also exists, mostly to take you to New York or Philadelphia, but it exists. Pretty good. Useful. I used it my whole life. I lived in New Jersey and went to the new school for a summer course, for a summer semester, where I learned two-dimensional design. And in that process, I took, I guess, I don't know which fucking bus it was. I think Path, maybe? I don't know. Every day. And it was pretty great. You get out at, not Javits Center. Where the fuck do you get out? I've forgotten everything. Port Authority. Thank you. You get out of Port Authority. There's a Midtown Comics right near it, around like 50. I don't know where it is, but I used to go there all the time after. And I would buy a comic book to read on the journey back to New Jersey. On the long journey back to New Jersey. 40th and 7th. Oh, that's where the Midtown Comics. I thought it was the 50th. I was wrong. But yeah, that's for another day. Grab a dollar slice sometimes. But yeah, that's what I did. And it was great. I was young. I had so much fucking freedom. I was able to do all of that stuff only because of public transit. I would have never been able to do that if New York and New Jersey did not have any kind of public transit, and I would have to rely on a car somehow. Good public transit means that your situation, your commute is better and easier when you don't have a car. That's how it fucking works. Awesome. All right, let's watch.
In this ugly hellscape that the auto industry built for us. And what's most insidious is the financials behind all of this. As the suburbs expanded, they needed more and more roads, highways, bridges, infrastructure to stay afloat. But because the nature of the suburb is spread out single-family housing as opposed to the densely packed city apartment dwelling, the suburbs have too few people to be able to fund this infrastructure. And so they have to keep expanding in order to fund themselves. And even then, they still can't fund themselves. And so they often rely on tax dollars from city dwellers to subsidize their suburban excesses. And who lives in the cities because of white flight? Oh yeah, people of color. When it comes to housing, people of color have been screwed over in literally every way imaginable. So we have this self-perpetuating cycle. The growth of suburbs leads to more suburban sprawl, which increases the need for cars, which leads to the building of more highways and roads, which leads to not enough income to pay for the suburbs, which leads to the growth of the suburbs. And Black and brown communities and cities are forced to subsidize suburban lifestyles at the expense of the beautification of their own communities, leading to the degradation of inner city neighborhoods. So we're literally all living in ugly shitholes. Well, almost all of us. According to an article from The Guardian, beautiful cities have 6 qualities. They're orderly, but not homogenous. Humans love organized complexity. They have visible life, streets full of people.
Yeah, like Kowloon. I mean, I'm not even kidding. I do think Kowloon is kind of fire. The more I think about Kowloon, the more I'm like, it's where dreams are made of. The walled city, holy fuck. Concrete jungle, where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do. Unless at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. You will not be able to avoid those ads unless you live in Kowloon, the walled city. I don't think I serve ads there. Or you could just subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, where you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that is me. Here is the 3-minute ad break now.
and activity make cities beautiful instead of bleak. They're compact, not sprawling. They have orientation and mystery, the ability to both get lost and not get lost, which is achieved by a balance between small streets and big ones. They have appealing scale with an ideal building height of 5 stories. When we adhere to this sort of guidance, we get dense and medium-rise cities like Berlin and Amsterdam, and they're uniquely local, embracing the unique characteristics of the place. This accurately describes many cities in Europe, which is why so many of us flock there for vacations to gawk, because we literally can't imagine living in a place so aesthetically pleasing. But it also accurately describes the richest, most gentrified areas in our American cities, minus the uniquely local part, because they all kind of look the same. I'm talking former warehouses, often around 5 stories tall, turn into beautiful lofts, lots of small local boutiques, adequate public
I fucking hate this shit so much. What are they called? Is it 5+1s or whatever? I see that. This is my most NIMBY take. I'm sorry. This is my most fucking NIMBY take, dude. It's so gross. It's so ugly. I hate the way that they're designed. I hate the way that they're built. I hate the way that they look. And it's like every fucking YIMBY rides for this shit on Twitter. They're like, oh my God. Oh my God. It means you hate, it means you want homeless people to die on the streets. It's like, no, I don't. No, I don't. I don't. I would prefer brutalist architecture, which this is like, I guess, what is this, like modern brutalist? I don't fucking know what this would be considered. But I would much prefer the fucking rugged, communist, brutalist city block to this, okay? And I hate brutalist architecture. Look how gross and nasty this shit is, dude. Ugh. 5/1s only exist because it's cheap, but it's awful housing because it's timber framed and you hear everything.
Former warehouses, often around 5 stories tall, turn into beautiful lofts, lots of small local boutiques, adequate public transportation, small alleys and large roads, and visible life. I'm thinking the North Loop here in Minneapolis, or Back Bay or South End in Boston, where I went to law school. You know, places where mostly only upper-class white people can afford to live.
She's talking about New Culver City right now. What Culver City's been like turned into, basically, what they're trying to turn Culver City into. Obviously, Sony has been there for, decades, so they got a lot of tax dollars. And now, if you look at Culver City, back when I first moved to Los Angeles 10 fucking years ago and started working in Culver City in a studio, it was very different. It was very different than what it is now. So many fucking parts of Culver City is just exactly that.
Because of course. But like I said at the beginning, it didn't have to be like this. And there are people working to undo the last century's work of uglifying our entire country. Cities like Minneapolis, where I live, as well as Los Angeles and the state of Oregon, have started changing regulations around single-family homes to allow for greater density and less reliance on cars, such as allowing for the addition of accessory dwelling units to existing houses and removing requirements for certain numbers of parking spaces for every unit or bedroom in apartments in cities where inhabitants are the least likely to own a car. And across the country, ballot initiatives are being introduced related to repealing or adjusting zoning rules that unnecessarily bar the creation of more affordable and more dense housing where it is desperately needed. At the same time, there's been an increased call for focusing on the walkability of cities, both in urban areas as well as suburban areas. This involves wider pedestrian-centric sidewalks, investment in mass transportation infrastructure, and increased green spaces, which should be implemented equitably with a special focus on lower-income neighborhoods in cities where the suburbs have historically drained the funds away from those inner-city neighborhoods. On the federal level, in 2015, the Obama administration passed the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule, or AFFH rule, which required cities, counties, states, and public housing agencies receiving money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, to create plans that take meaningful action to overcome historic patterns of segregation, promote fair housing choice, and foster inclusive communities that are free from discrimination. But then, of course, the Trump administration rescinded the rule, and then...
Okay, let's be real. I don't know. I don't know enough about this, but given Obama's performance, I doubt that this was already like a successful of an initiative. I can't speak for Obama's direct performance in this regard, or the HUD under Obama, but I can speak to what I have seen in that time frame, and it never really was. They barely ever addressed any of the racial wrongs.
And Biden issued an executive order telling HUD to examine the effects of repealing the rule. But whether the AFFH would have really made a huge difference is questionable, as it didn't require cities to actually prove they were doing anything. They just had to show a strategy or plan and then get federal dollars. So not only is it questionable the efficacy of a federal law aimed at righting the wrongs caused by suburbanization over the last century, will also always be stalled because of the predictable pendulum swing of politics and political opinions at the federal level. So ultimately, the monumental task of fixing a century of hideous city planning wrought by the expansion of the suburbs, supported by federal bills and extensive auto industry lobbying, falls into the hands of states and localities. But trends are changing. Demand for large lot suburban sprawl is down, and some experts estimate that most of the demand for new housing between now and 2040 will be for attached homes and small lot homes, because largely people want what the cities have, i.e., things to do. Anything to do at all, but they can't afford city prices. And the things that make cities particularly walkable can be translated to a suburban setting with the right city planning. According to Project Drawdown's Walkable Cities Solutions, the factors that make cities and neighborhoods most walkable include density of homes, workplaces, and other spaces, wide, well-lit, tree-lined sidewalks and walkways, safe and direct pedestrian crossings, and connectivity with mass transit. This can be applied to the suburbs as well.
You know, everything that is not a suburb.
Well, think Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, a designated downtown area that isn't monopolized by parking garages, where shops, workplaces, restaurants, artist studios, and more are concentrated in a central location.
Springfield. Again, interestingly enough, so much Americana, so much of American culture in television and movies have featured this idyllic, this incredible like suburban paradise that's a suburb, but it also has like a downtown area. Springfield was like this as well. Fuck it, the Family Guy, even. Didn't Family Guy have a downtown area as well in Rhode Island?
And the houses around them are on small lots, including some multi-family housing above the shops. So there's a lot of people living, working, and shopping nearby, aka density. The sidewalks are wide and well lit year-round, lined with trees and location-specific greenery. Pedestrians never have to cross more than 2 lanes of traffic.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a fucking Hollywood lot, by the way, Chad. I'm not saying, but you know, it's what they choose to present as this like ideal living circumstance, like this ideal mode of existence, and yet it never manifests itself in our real lives.
To get around the town, and it's centered around a town square with green space. This layout creates easy community building, as it is rife with third spaces, that is, spaces outside of home and work where people can meet and form community, spaces that are dramatically lacking in the United States today. The only thing missing from the Stars Hollow scenario is connection to easy mass transit, like a commuter rail line, though the East Coast is slightly better at that than the rest of the country. Oh, and also Black people. Black people and low-income people are also missing from this scenario. Because this idyllic picture I just painted for you in the few localities where it does exist in America is largely designated for rich white people, a remnant of legally enforced racism that barred Black people from ever getting a foot in the door when suburbia was coming up, despite the fact that the expansion of suburbia actively decimated their communities through highway reconstruction and rerouted their tax dollars into building the hideous suburban infrastructure that we all live with today. So I wanted to end this video on a positive note, as I so infrequently do, by highlighting the work that is being done to center Black communities and Black lives in city planning and urban development. Black Space is a collective of 200 Black designers.
This is an incredible YouTube video. Fuck. Oh my God, mask off for me. What? University Times kind of support with this, with all the students supporting this type of setup, but also crushing it with the university infrastructure. Bro, OMG, mask off for me with my last comment based on higher education demographics. What are you talking about? Black people are you know, they're represented in higher education demographics. It's actually mask off for you to assume that Black people don't go to college. I'm confused by what you're saying. Why does she think she can speak for all Blacks, though? Dude, honestly, sometimes you just need to learn how to shut the fuck up, you know? Here's a good thing to try, okay? Try shutting the fuck up. You could just not type that shit and then press enter. It'd be real fucking good for you. It'd be real fucking good for everyone else in here. You know what I mean? It'd be good for all of us. Oh, my Lord.
Architects, artists, and urban planners who explore ways to center Black life in the built environment. They're doing work in Atlanta, Chicago, Oklahoma, and Indianapolis. Their work encompasses 3 pillars: neighborhood strategy, where they work at a neighborhood level to co-create spaces that affirm and amplify Black presence in public life; customized learning to teach strategies and values for ethical design practices; and urbanist experiences, bringing together Black designers, architects, and urban planners to share new ways to center Blackness in architecture, design, and urban planning. Their work has helped teach new ways to plan cities that center Black communities instead of decimate them. Their work has included building redesign, walking tours, lectures, design workshops, and more. You can support their work at the link in the description. Like I said at the beginning, America is fucking ugly, but it didn't have to be this way, and it doesn't have to be in the future. You can support the ways that your own city is working to dismantle the historical fuckery that
Why America see everything on pseudoscience race terms is so funny. Why not only on class terms? What are you talking about? Race and class in this country are mixed in very obvious ways. That's number one. And number two, she also did talk about poverty and keeping poors away. But when you're talking about redlining, it's not on racial boundaries at all. As a matter of fact, she actually literally accounted for a massive amount of government help that came for white people that Black people were not allowed, in the form of a GI Bill that excluded Black GIs. So in that situation, you know, you have to factor race into it, because the segregation is done on racial boundaries.
led to this by contacting your city council members, running for office yourself, donating to projects like Black Space, and getting involved in zoning board meetings that could help change the density and makeup of the communities where you live. If you like this video, you might also like my last video all about how Watergate ruined everything. Thank you to
This was incredible. She's fucking awesome. Asia Miller, I'm unfamiliar with her work, but goddamn, this is fucking great. I mean, it was clear, concise, beautifully written.